Sing it one and all. Join in the chorus. North Melbourne's on the ball. Good old North Melbourne, they're champions, you'll agree. North Melbourne is the team that plays to win for you and me.
Welcome back, Shimboners. On today's pod, we'll be going through all the news throughout the week, touching on our preview for this Sunday's game at the graveyard slot of 4:40 against the reigning premiers, the Brisbane Lions, down at Boot Park. Frog will be there, I'll be there. Big test against a great opponent. But before we get to all that, the rundown's thrown out the window. The teams have just dropped. The socials have gone into meltdown, rightly so, because it's time to cry out for justice for Will Phillips. He's been omitted. Fans are furious. He led the game in pressure acts last week, 9 tackles. You can see the difference off 60% game time. I understand the argument that you can't probably have George Wardlaw and Luke Parker in the same side on team balance, but with the way our midfield's been beaten lately, I would rather have 2 defensive mids in the same centre square than some of our midfielders who don't want to run both ways. So really upsetting to see him dropped. But let's just have a quick look at the teams in general. So going out, we've got Callan Dawson's been omitted as well. Jackson Archer, unfortunately, with that 8-week hamstring, which really hurts. But Will Phillips, the big one there. And then looking at some of the ins, Toby Pink, well, he will play because he's been named on the field. So he'll come in. Aiden Core in the squad. George Wardlaw back. That's fantastic. Zach Fisher, Griffin Logue, and young Geordie Payne. So, yeah, initial thoughts on the teams. It's really shocking. It's left a lot of supporters angry, myself included, as I mentioned. But really disappointed for Will. His heart and soul. He's one of the most beloved players by the supporter group. You know what you're going to get week in, week out with his effort levels. And he bleeds for the jumper, and unfortunately he's been omitted yet again. And I really feel for the young man because he must be sitting there thinking, what more do I have to do? Because he's been doing all the defensive stuff. Champion data reflects that of time in the centre bounce, and we win more often than not. So his contested and clearance work's been good, but unfortunately finds himself out of the side once again. So some other players, I don't want to be too negative, but how on earth is Bailey Scott in the squad? Came back as the sub after playing 1 VFL game out of 3 weeks. Came on, played a large portion of the game. I think he came on in the second quarter or after halftime. Regardless of that, he had 3 disposals, no impact. And I just don't understand it. Griffin Logue coming into the squad as well. I don't understand that either. VFL form's been atrocious, really. Like, he hasn't done anything noteworthy to come back in. Just some of the selection here is staggering. I will say, though, I think Core will probably play. Brisbane have the 3 tall forwards. We'll get to the matchups a bit later on, but just really disappointed with the Will Phil, as a lot of supporters are, and it's pretty raw. Obviously, the team's only just dropped, but quite upset to see him go out. As the one thing with Will is, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get 100% effort, and in a struggling side, that is really what you need. You need someone to lead the way with the effort. You know you're going to get it from George. You know you're going to get it from Parker. And I think he's just a good addition in the midfield. So disappointed to see him not out there on Sunday, as well as the fact I think he'd be a good matchup against a Lockie Neal to try and nullify some of his influence. So, yeah, disappointed not to see him in. As for some of the other big talking points through the week, and I'm already fired up, but if this next subject really got me angry during the week. So, Willie Rioli. Right, now I know this is a North podcast, but I'm going to go off topic a little bit because this is ridiculous that he is the 3rd time in the last 12 months that he's given threats to a player, and it's not in the heat of the moment. He's waited till after the game, messaged one of Bailey Dale's teammates to tell him to be careful walking the streets in Darwin, and the AFL, nothing to see. And I know they've come out today and they've done the whole, well, we're going to give him a 1-match suspension after he'd already withdrawn himself. It's just weak leadership, which we've mentioned numerous times on this podcast. Andrew Dillon, Laura Kane, they're ruining the game. So how do you think Paul Curtis is feeling sitting at home? So he executes the perfect tackle Unfortunately, Josh Sinn was concussed, which, as we've mentioned on this pod, well, a fair bit of that was brought on by him with the way he thrusted himself forward looking for a free kick. But 3 weeks for a good tackle, 3 death threats that you can throw around over 12 months and nothing to be seen. So it's absolute shambles, the game. And one thing I was thinking as well, North fans, it would be worth reflecting on. Can you imagine if this was Alistair Clarkson? Like, we know the hysteria around him using some swear words on the boundary last year and then basically telling Jimmy Webb to enjoy his holiday with a couple of profanity words thrown in there after he knocked Jai Simpkin out. But can you imagine if this was Clarko? They'd be calling for a public execution. So it's just weak leadership as usual, and they need to go ASAP. Let's talk about injury updates. So unfortunately, more bad news. A bit of a bad news pod so far, but Miller Bergman, his season's over with an ACL, and without being too bleak, I think unfortunately his time at North's probably up, as he was on the borderline. He had a lot to prove, and unfortunately the ACL rules him out for the rest of the year, and a significant part of next year too as well with the rehab. So yeah, really feel sorry for the young man living out his dream, and he probably would have got a chance to play over the back end of the year. I mean, his VFL form wasn't fantastic, but the half-back line is one that we are really not firing on all cylinders over, so he would have probably got an opportunity. So that's really sad for him. Sending our wishes from the Shimboners pod out to him, as he's a Shimboner at the end of the day, and we hate to see that happen, especially to such a young man who's just trying to chase his dreams. Another half-back who's had a unfortunate injury setback again is Josh Goder, and this is starting to get really concerning because I reckon this is his 3rd or 4th setback since coming back from that Achilles. So he was 2 to 3 weeks. He had the Callan Dawsons from last year, just 2 to 3 weeks every injury update, but now it's out to 4 with a quad injury. So injuries around his leg everywhere. I think he had a hamstring, obviously. I think he had a bit of calf injury, and now the quad. So it's almost looking like year over for him. I mean, he's going to have to play a block of at least 3 or 4 games in the VFL before being available for AFL selection. And obviously the great white hope leading into the season, a lot of North fans, I had him in my best 23 if he was available. I reckon a lot of North fans do. We know the damaging right foot he can bring, as well as he's that 190 sort of perfect hybrid defender that we're really looking for. So terrible news for him. And then Archer as well, we touched on at the top, but an 8-week hammy. My goodness, these hamstrings just killing us now. Gone to the days of the old 2 to 3 hammy. So Arch, but you could tell when he grabbed really high that it wasn't your average hamstring. So 8 weeks for him, which is really disappointing because we'd only just got him back, and he's incredibly important to our side. And we'll get into it in a bit more detail a bit later, but I think Brisbane have the best medium and small forwards in the competition. So really going to be a week that we miss Jacko's influence and his shutdown ability. So 8 weeks have gone in the season. It's a third of the way through. So I thought we'd have a quick look at some of the year so far. So I reckon the top 3 in the Sid Barker as we stand would probably be, I think Luke Parker would be in front at the moment, Paul Curtis and Tristan Sherry to round out the top 3. So let's have a look at our performances so far and reflecting on them now that we sort of know who's good and who's not AFL wide. So round 1 we went down by 16 points to the Dogs. Now, we were filthy, and as a supporter base we were filthy about that performance and not getting the win. But looking back, they've been incredibly good, the Dogs. Even with missing stars, like Treloar only came back last week. Bont's obviously been huge since he's come back, but I mean, they were claiming Darcy the greatest player in the comp, and Chong kept him to 1 goal. So looking back at that, yes, it was frustrating. We're in a position to win, but not getting that win doesn't look as bad now because of what they've done to other sides. Like, they absolutely belted the Saints by about 70 points. So I know we're at a stage where we're sick of competitive losses, but looking back, to score 97 points and go down, unfortunately, but it wasn't too bad. Round 2, obviously, we had our huge 59-point win over the D's where we thought we'd turned a corner. Round 3 was not a bad performance against Adelaide. We were definitely in it for different periods, although I reckon from the first quarter onwards, we were never probably going to win, but we hung around. Round 4 was a disgrace against Sydney. They look like a side that's going to be a 6 to 12 place, so not good enough there, and they were missing quite a lot of good players as well. Round 5 against the Suns, well, we hung with them for 3 quarters basically, and then got blown out, which is the story of our year really. We play 3 good quarters, and then our one poor quarter is that bad that it rules us out of games. So, but they'll be a top 8 side by end of year. And then our worst performance of the year in round 6 against the Blues went down by 82 points in a Good Friday disgrace, to put it bluntly. Like, it was as embarrassing a performance as I can remember, with the expectation going in, and the way we played was just disgraceful. Then we had a 9-point loss to the Power, where we really shot ourselves in the foot, and then last week as well against Essendon. So the last 2 weeks we've had games under 10 points that we should have probably won both of them, but here we find ourselves after 8 rounds at 1-7 with a real possibility of going into the bye with 1 win. And if you said that at the start of the year, North fans would be calling it an absolute disaster. And I think it just makes the game against Richmond coming up so important, because I don't think anyone's going in this Sunday thinking we're going to beat the Lions. But with the Tigers in round 10 before Collingwood and then the bye, if we go into the bye 1-10 or 1-11, depending what round it is, that's major disaster. That we thought we'd make the bounce to 7 to 8 wins. Last year we went into the bye with 0 wins. If we only won 1 extra game, I think it's really concerning. And playing sides like Essendon that are around the mark, like sides we'd be expecting to beat, and if we don't beat Richmond, it's major panic stations, I think. And I think towards the back end of the year we'll definitely pinch a few, but it's important that we need to continue that form and not be happy that we had 2 games in a row where we're competitive and then go up against Brisbane this week and get absolutely blown out of the water would be a disaster. But I thought seeing we're a third of the way through the season, we'd just have a little look back and reflect on some of our performances so far. Let's have a look at the last time we met the Lions. I was there, unfortunately, gather round last year at Norwood Oval. We went down 112 to 42 in a game that was over 5 minutes into the game. I reckon they kicked 4 goals in 5 minutes, and it was curtains from there on in. Having a look at some of our standout performers, Charlie Comben, it was his first game in defence. He had 25 disposals, 8 marks, and was best on for us in a game where not many performed. Shees had 35. I'd love to see him do that again. Having a look at some of the matchups for this weekend, obviously the ruck will be a big one with Big X versus Big O. I don't think Oscar McInerney's that fit, so I think X can sort of run him ragged around the ground. I think X is a really underrated athlete at the club, and we know he loves that crash and bash style. They'll probably play a second ruck. Darcy Fort's in their extended squad, so whether he comes in or they just run with a Darcy Gardner as their second ruck will be interesting to see. The midfield battle, well, they're absolutely stacked through there. And initially I was thinking Will Phillips to do a bit of not necessarily a tagging role, because I don't think he can go with him, but definitely keeping a close attention to either Lachie Neale or Will Ashcroft at the stoppages. But obviously Will not in the side now, so that won't happen. But our midfield of LDU, Parker, Tommy Powell, Georgie Wardlaw against Lachie Neale, Josh Dunkley, who I think is really underrated, the Ashcroft boys, and Hugh McCluggage, who also is having a really good year. So it's going to be a really tough matchup to win. Our midfield hasn't been firing at all really this year consistently, and they're coming up against arguably the best mids in the comp. But I think the matchup of Wardlaw v Dunkley will be a great one to watch if you're a neutral. 2 bulls that just go as hard as they can at the footy. Having a look at the defensive matchups, so Eric Hipwood, I think Chom probably gets that. I mean, Eric's not a huge contested mark, but he's pretty agile, so maybe even Core if he plays and comes in. The Logan Morris one will be interesting because he's not your typical key forward as well. He's pretty agile, which I think because of him and Hipwood in the same forward line that we probably see Core or potentially Logue come in more mobile than to play on those types than Chom or Toby Pink. So keep keen eye on Friday 5 o'clock when the final 23s are locked in. So that'll be interesting to watch. If I was at selection, first of all, Will Phillips straight back in, but I'd play Core over Logue. I mean, Logue, I like what he can bring, and unfortunately he's come off an ACL, but his turning circle's like a Mack truck at the moment, and yeah, with some of the way the Brisbane mids will get the ball in, I just think he's too slow to go with Brisbane's forward line, so that'll be interesting. And then obviously they'll play their third tall, which they've been using Darcy Gardner in, which would be an ideal matchup for Toby Pink. If not, they'll play Darcy Fort, so bit of a slower sort of kick down the line for their third tall. But then you look at their small forwards, and this is where it really gets scary because there's going to be so many headaches. As I mentioned a bit earlier, I think they've got the best medium and small forwards in the game. So you look at Charlie Cameron, who hasn't lit it up at all this year. I think he kicked 4 against the Suns last week, but he'd been pretty much unsighted. So he'll try and fill his boots against North. I don't really know who the matchup is there. Maybe Riley Hardiman. Cal Archie slides under the radar for them as sort of the sixth forward, but hits the scoreboard. And then you've got the sort of powerful burst forwards that they've got in Cam Rayner and Zach Bailey, which is going to be really damaging players. And we just don't really have any like-for-like matchups there either. Like Elmac's probably going to have to take one of those. If I was coaching, you'd probably send him to Archie, as he's probably the least damaging out of the three. But yeah, you've got your... Where do you hide your Caleb Daniels on matchups like this? And Kyle Oman, another one I didn't mention, didn't have written down, but he's back into their squad, and I'd be shocked if he didn't play if he's fit, because we know the talent he is. So such a dynamic forward line going up against our back line, which has been nothing. There's no real stars back there. I mean, the last couple of weeks they've battled hard, and we've kept those scores down under 100, but it's going to be a big test for those guys. I think Finn O'Sullivan probably rolls to half back this week, so even they might even try Bailey Scott back there, and I've shared my thoughts on that. I think he's not a good enough kick to play at half back, but purely for his defensive side of his game, they may play him there this week. So it's going to be a big watch, and it really scares me, the damage at that forward line, and I don't know whether we have any good matchups for any of them, to be honest. Then you have a look at our forward line. So I was really surprised to see Jack Darling still in. I thought with a smaller ground, a bit more narrow at Bluntstone. Bluntstone, what is it? Ninja Park now. I thought they might just play the two talls and then try and bring some more frontal pressure against Brisbane, but that's not the way they've gone. So I think Jack Payne probably gets the Nick Larkin matchup. He's more of the lockdown, and then Harris Andrews will be an interesting one, or one of the best intercept marks in the game, going against either Finbar, Maley, or Big JD. I wouldn't be shocked if Clarko maybe played Jack Darling just because of the structure of the Brisbane backline, and maybe what we've seen him do off the ball on the likes of Alir in terms of getting in a dangerous space to stop their intercepting game. Maybe that's why he kept his spot, and he's going to try and do a bit of a negating role on Harris Andrews. That'd be interesting to watch. Their sort of medium defenders don't really spring off paper, like Ryan Lester and Noah Ainsworth. They're serviceable players, but they're certainly not stars. And then you look at their lethal users off halfback. I mean, Darcy Wilmot's growing into a good player, and then obviously one of the biggest germs in the competition, Dane Zorko, where if you leave him with too much time, that's when there's serious trouble. So I've having a look at Brisbane's game style. I mean, I watch quite a lot of Brisbane, but they're not necessarily a quick side by foot or even ball movement wise, but they're incredibly good users. So once they get it past halfway, they usually explode. So that'll be really dangerous, especially on a more narrow ground at Bluntstone again, at Ninja. If we just let them walk it out of our forward line, don't bring any pressure, they'll get it to halfway, and there'll be so much space in that forward line. They'll all push up, and they'll put our defence under serious pressure. So big watch on the midfield and the forward line, because there'll be lots of pressure, which is why I wouldn't mind seeing Geordie Payne come in as well. I mean, another little zippy sort of forward that could apply pressure, whether they play him or Constante or potentially both. It will be a big watch as well. So Really looking forward to seeing him get a go at some point this year. I know a lot of supporters are calling for him to come in, so we'll be keeping an eye on that one. Right, let's get into Baz's big call. So I had this written before the team selection, so we'll go through it and just have a little look and see what our thoughts are, because I had North Mids to keep Lachie Neale under 25. So his last 5 games was 25, 31, 25, 28 and 42. Now, I thought with Will Phil in the side, I thought he would be a good matchup for him. Not necessarily a direct tag, but might have to... I'm going to redo that one now because, I think Neil is going to have a field day now. But let's go off the top of my head. I think Big Game Zane kicks 3 or more. That would be my big call this week. Episode 111 today. Thanks to everyone who has subscribed. Our goal is to get to 500 subscribers on YouTube before the mid-season bye. I think we're at about 380 now, so please subscribe if you can. Like, follow, share the pod, whatever you can do. It doesn't cost anything. It's the best way to help grow our pod and get it out to more shimboners. So episode 111 today, so keeping on with our favourite player for the corresponding Guernsey. I mean, it's pretty simple, isn't it? Glenn Archer, the shimboner of the century. Being in my first sort of footy memories was towards the back end of his career, sort of the 2006, 2007, watching with Dad and seeing the way he played. Like, your eyes are immediately drawn to Arch and the player that he was, and how iconic his celebrations and with his glove on, and tough, uncompromising, and stupidly brave. Definitely the bravest player I've seen, and that's, not necessarily a one-horse race when you've got your Jack Siebels that are ridiculously brave as well, and looking back and watching footage of Anthony Stevens and co as well. So Glenn Archer, a champion of the club. We're so lucky now that we get another sort of taste of it with young Jacko, who's very much similar in the way he plays his footy. But yeah, I'll give a shout out to Michael Frito as well. I enjoyed watching Spud, and more so enjoyed some of his battles that he had with the umpires. Are you kidding? That famous footage up at Manuka Oval when he got into it and gave away about 350s in about 5 minutes. But yeah, so there's some of the two. It was no real competition. Glenn Archer, I think, would be 99% of supporters' favourite number 11, with maybe some of them having Spud as well. But so let's get into the predictions. So I think it could get ugly, but I'm going to be optimistic and say Brisbane win by 33 points. I mean, the lights will be on. It's going to be dark. It's probably going to be a bit dewy as well. So hopefully our mids can adapt and keep it in nice and tight. The likes of Wardlaw can get to work at Luke Parker and then get it out to our good users in LDU and Tommy Powell. And just an interesting stat on Tommy Powell I saw during the week. He's actually leading our side this year in tackles, which surprised me, with Big X in second. But I know that's a bit of a negative a lot of supporters have on Tommy, some of his defensive work. But I thought last week he really brought that and just tidy up a little bit of his ball use. And he'll be really asserting himself as a good midfielder in the competition. So still really young, and it's important to remember that. I mean, some of us, you sort of look at Tommy Powell and think, oh, he's 24, 25, but still a while off that. He's only 22 years of age. So, yeah, a big game for Tommy as well, seeing if he can back up the defensive efforts. Right, let's get into our tipping to close out the pod. Just a short and sharp one today. Solo, and then we'll be back to review the pod with the Frogs. So, the tipping brought to you by SC Rings, our great friends there. I'm 106th out of 154. Not good. Bulls cooking still on top, but we had our first 9. So a big shout out to Flopster77. Great number. The Big Chief's old man, he drove in the number 77 when he was racing days down here in Tassie. So even more special to hear that number. But yeah, congratulations, Flopster. Perfect round and only 3 off the margin. So well done to you. Let's get into it. So the game that starts tonight against the Freo Dockers taking on the Collingwood Magpies. I'm going to go the Dockers. I think Collingwood have rested 4 or 5 stars. Freo under the pump. If they get blown out today, it's good night, Justin Longmuir for me. So I think the Dockers have that much talent they have to respond. St Kilda and Carlton tomorrow night. I think the Blues get that done. I just don't rate St Kilda, but they keep upsetting sides, so that'll be an interesting watch. Hawks beat the D's. I think Sydney beat Essendon at Marvel. I've gone with Suns to beat the Dogs. Really unsure about this one, but seeing it's in Darwin, they don't lose up there. It's almost like the Hawks in Lonnie. They just 3 or 4 goal better side when they play there. Then the showdown, which would be an interesting one. Lots of words shared as usual in that game. I'm going to go the Crows. I've got the Tigers beating the Eagles, the Cats beating the Giants just at home, and then obviously the Lions getting the job done. So, yeah, it'll be an interesting round of football. You know, we're at the 4:40 prime time, baby. Now, who needs Thursday nights when we can be 4:40 on a Sunday? Which, again, just a mini grind my gears. Why have they scheduled that time slot in Tassie? It makes no sense. And worst of all, it's on Mother's Day, and it's competing with the V8 Supercars, which is up my way in Launceston. So, really interesting scheduling by the AFL there. You'd think they'd want the 2 games North play in Hobart to be well attended with the Tasmania side coming in the next couple of years. So, gee, they've stitched us up. They've given Hawthorn Friday nights and Saturday nights down in Launceston, but given us the old 4:40 graveyard shift on Mother's Day competing with the V8s. So, yeah, that shows how much they care about us and our games in Hobart. But, yeah, to everyone getting along, I'll be there. I'm not anticipating a big crowd, but really looking forward to get down to see the boys compete. And that's all we ask at the end of the day. We just want to see them have a red-hot crack. I don't think any supporters are going in expecting us to beat the Lions, but we want to see 4 quarters of effort. And I want to see us win the bloody first quarter. I want us that revved up and ready to go that we go out there and we just catch them off guard a bit. Because I think Brisbane, they haven't been super convincing in a lot of their wins. Aside from probably St Kilda, I don't think they've had any wins where they've been on the 4 quarters. So they'll be coming down. You know, Tassie's a lot colder than what Brisbane is, so we catch them off guard a little bit. Playing North, it's almost like they might be going through a bit of a walkthrough. So I know George will bring it, so it's on the other mids starting in there with him that we get the early advantage, get it to Larky. Need him to kick 3 goals for a free cheeseburger, so hopefully he can do that as well and have one of them on the way back, on the drive back to Lonnie. But yeah, really interested to see how we go. I think it's a good test. Last week going in, obviously with all the media stuff and expecting to win, there was a lot of pressure. It's probably the polar opposite this week. No one has us beating Brisbane. But yeah, and the game starts 0-0 at the end of the day, and one of these days we're going to take a big scalp, so why not this week? Why not against the Lions? We can catch them off guard early, as I mentioned. They're not going to be fully switched on. And then, yeah, George, nice and early, him and X, smashing bodies. They won't like it. So, yeah, get along to the game if you can. If you're a Tasmanian member or just a supporter thinking about going, get along and support the boys. So that's our second last game in Tassie. So looking forward to getting along, cheer the boys on, and hope for a competitive performance. So that's enough of me waffling on. Thanks for listening. Solo pod's always a little bit harder, so shout out to anyone who does solo podcasting. But yeah, that's about me. Until next time, thanks for listening. We'll be back to review the game with the Frog. That'll probably drop on Monday because we won't get back till about 10:30 Sunday night. So thanks for all your support again, guys. Best listeners in the world. Let a fellow North member or North supporter know about our podcast. Share us round. The more the merrier. And don't forget to get your listener questions in for Sunday. Until then, Gurus!
Good old North Melbourne, the champions you'll agree. North Melbourne is the team that plays to win for